In this class, we are going to study about the third type of reproduction in kingdom fungi, and that is the sexual reproduction. So as we know from our previous two categories, that is the kingdom Monera and the kingdom Protista, there also we have studied the sexual reproduction there, and we know what are the basic features of sexual reproduction from those categories. So the difference between the sexual reproduction and the previous two types of reproduction that we have studied, and that was asexual reproduction and the vegetative reproduction. So the main difference between these two types of reproduction, that is the asexual and vegetative, and also the sexual. So the main difference is that here generally two parents are involved, and also the amount of variation in the offspring that are being created here is much more as compared to the asexual or vegetative reproduction. So the offsprings will have new recombination of characters, or we can say that the amount of variation between, or the difference between the offsprings and the parents would be much more as compared to the asexual or vegetative reproduction. Now a very important difference between those two methods and this sexual reproduction is that here there is formation of gametes, that is the sex cells, that is the cells which will be directly participating in the formation of zygote. So here there is formation of those sex cells or gametes, but in the case of asexual or vegetative reproduction we don't find any formation of gametes, and after that there will be something called as fertilization, or that is also called as fusion of gametes. So this is the first and one of the most important features of sexual reproduction, that is it involves formation and fusion of gametes. Gametes are sex cells that directly participate in the formation of the zygote. So this is the first feature of the sexual reproduction in fungi, or in either or in any other kingdom. We know that sexual reproduction does involve formation and fusion of gametes. So whether it's fungi or plantae or animalia, everywhere sexual reproduction involves fertilization, and we can also say formation and fusion of gametes. So this is the first thing about sexual reproduction of any category. Now with respect to fungi, we are going to study about four categories of fungi. For example, Phycomycetes, Ascomycetes, Basidiomycetes and Deuteromycetes. So in the first three types, that is the Ascomycetes, Basidiomycetes and the Phycomycetes. So in all these three categories we observe sexual reproduction. But the fourth category of fungi, that is called as Deuteromycetes, or it is also called as fungi imperfecti. So there we do not observe sexual reproduction. So out of the four categories of fungi, in Deuteromycetes we do not find sexual reproduction, or we can say we have not yet discovered sexual reproduction in the category of Deuteromycetes. So it takes place in all categories of fungi except the Deuteromycetes, which are also called as fungi imperfecti. Now we have to study about two terms, and that is the monoecious and dioecious. So it's not that only fungi are monoecious or dioecious. Every species or every organisms or various other categories of other organisms are also monoecious or dioecious. So the monoecious means that one individual or one single organism will have male sex organ as well as female sex organ. But in the case of dioecious, we observe that a single individual will either be male, that is it will have male sex organ, or an individual be either female, that is he or it will have the female sex organs. So this is the difference between monoecious and dioecious. So in the case of monoecious, a single individual has male sex organ and also the female sex organ. But in the case of dioecious, male and female sex organs are present on or in different individuals. So one individual can either be male and the other individual could either be female. So obviously male and female sex organs are present on different individuals, but here male and female sex organs are present in the same individual. So we have studied about two types of sexual reproduction. For example, syngamy and conjugation in the case of Protista. So here also we find two very common types of sexual reproduction, and that is conjugation and also syngamy, or it is also commonly called as fusion. So we have already studied about conjugation in paramecium and also in various other organisms. So we won't be repeating that here, but we know what is syngamy. Syngamy is fusion of gametes, or which is also normally called as fertilization. So these are two common types of sexual reproduction, or two common methods of sexual reproduction. And in syngamy we have three types, that is isogamy, anisogamy, oogamy. So we have already studied about the three types of syngamy. For example, the isogamy, the anisogamy, and also the oogamy in the kingdom Protista. So we won't be repeating that over here. Now apart from that, we have to understand something about homothallic and the other, which is called as heterothallic. So if a fungi is homothallic, so in the case of homothallic, the fertilization or sexual reproduction takes place between the genetically similar strains. So if a fungi is homothallic, it will only reproduce sexually with a genetically similar strain. And in the case of heterothallic fungi, or in the case of heterothallic forms of kingdom fungi, we find that sexual reproduction occurs commonly with the genetically different strains. So from this genetically similar strain and genetically different strain, we know where the variation will be more. So obviously when the genetically similar strains are getting involved in reproduction, in the case of homothallic form, the amount of variation will not be that much. But in the case of heterothallic forms, we see that genetically different strains or different sorts of individuals are participating in reproduction. So it is obvious that if different types of organisms are participating in reproduction, the characters of the offspring would be much different, and the amount of variation would be much more, or we can say there will be a recombination of characters in the offspring or the progeny. So these are the two common types of homothallic or the heterothallic fungi. Now in fusion, that is the syngamy, or we can also say that as fertilization. So fertilization or fusion or syngamy, it involves two basic steps. The first one is called as somatogamy. So in the case of somatogamy, or we can also say that as plasmogamy, so it involves fusion of the cytoplasm of two cells or two gametes. For example, if we have two cells, then this plasmogamy would be involved, or it will involve the fusion of the cytoplasm of the two cells. So the two cells will become something like this, but they will still have different nuclei. So after this plasmogamy, the next event is called as karyogamy. So karyogamy means that these two nucleus will become one. So the two nucleus are becoming one single nucleus, and the cell will become one single cell. So this is what is fusion over here. So first of all, the two cells fused, their cytoplasm fused, and after that their nuclei fused. So the cytoplasm fusion is called as plasmogamy, and the nuclei fusion, when the two nucleus of those two cells are fusing and they are becoming one single nucleus, that is called as karyogamy. Now when we come to the lower categories of fungi, we are going to study about something called as phycomycetes. So we'll study about phycomycetes, ascomycetes, basidiomycetes and deuteromycetes. So in the case of phycomycetes, this plasmogamy and karyogamy occur almost simultaneously. That is, very quickly after plasmogamy, this karyogamy will occur. But in the case of ascomycetes and basidiomycetes, the two-celled stage, that is like this. When there will be two gametes, they will fuse and then they will become a single cell. But there will be the 2 nucleate stage for a certain time. This is called as dikaryophase. So in the case of phycomycetes of fungi, just after plasmogamy, karyogamy occurs. But in the case of ascomycetes and basidiomycetes, this stage, that is 2 nucleate stage, although the 2 cells have become one, but the 2 nuclei have not become one. So 1 and 2 nuclei are over there, and this 2 nucleate stage is called as dikaryophase. So between plasmogamy and karyogamy, this dikaryophase would be there. That is, after plasmogamy, the cell will stop at the dikaryophase for a certain time, and after a certain time, this karyogamy will occur, and it occurs in the case of ascomycetes and basidiomycetes. So we can see that from here, in ascomycetes and basidiomycetes, a dikaryophase, this is the dikaryophase, that is the 2 nucleate stage, is observed, or it occurs between plasmogamy and karyogamy. So obviously this dikaryophase occurs between this plasmogamy and karyogamy. Now we have studied about the basics of sexual reproduction, and now we'll study about the types of sexual reproduction or various methods of sexual reproduction. And the first one is planogametic copulation. So it is very simple. It involves fusion between flagellate gametes. So both the gametes that will be fusing will be flagellate. So if they are flagellate, we can see, or we can say that these 2 gametes will be motile. So wherever flagella is present, normally that cell is motile. So this planogametic copulation involves fusion between flagellate gametes or motile gametes. And it is very much obvious that wherever flagella is present, we can say it will be most probably found in aquatic, or whether it might be marine or freshwater, but also in moist soil or moist conditions, because flagella causes locomotion in moist conditions only. Now the second one is the gametangial contact. So here 2 types of structure will be formed. For example, the oogonium, and the other one is called as antheridium. So these are the 2 sex organs. This antheridium is the male sex organ, and this oogonium is the female sex organ. Now the antheridium will come in contact with the oogonium, that is this male sex organ. It comes in contact with the oogonium or female sex organ, and the male sex organ, that is the antheridium, transfers the male gamete directly to the oogonium. So this is what is gametangial contact. So in this case, the antheridium comes in contact with the oogonium. The antheridium transfers the male gamete or the male nucleus to the oogonium, and therefore the fertilization thus occurs. Now the third type is the gametangial copulation. Now it involves complete fusion of 2 gametangia. So in the case of fungi, there is a structure called gametangia. It bears the gametes. So we can say these are gamete forming or gamete bearing structure. So in this case, the 2 gametangia, that is the gamete bearing structure, fuse completely to form the zygote. So in this case, the 2 gamete forming structures are themselves combining, but in this case the antheridium was transferring the male gamete to the oogonium. But so this is the difference. Here the gamete forming structure are themselves fusing to form the zygote. So that was the third type. The fourth type is spermatization. So in this case, the non-flagellated male gametes called spermatia or spermatia, these are produced in very large number. So the amount of male gametes that are being produced in the case of spermatization, these are a lot, or these are huge in number, and these will combine with the female gamete in a certain region, or we can say that as a cone of reception or a normal receptive outgrowth, and that is called as trichogyny. So in this case, that is the spermatization, the spermatia, that is the male gametes kind of thing. So these are produced in a large number, and these will combine with the female gamete in a region called trichogyny. So what is trichogyny? It is a receptive outgrowth. So we can say that the female gamete has this point or this cone of reception or a projective outgrowth from where the male gamete will attach with the female gamete, and this is what is called as spermatization. And the fifth one is very simple, and that is somatogamy. So we have already studied what is hypha and mycelium. So it will involve fusion of two somatic hypha. So the fifth one is the most simple and easy one. It simply involves fusion of two somatic hypha, and the structure of hypha we have already studied. We know what is hypha and mycelium. So in this case, the two hypha or two somatic hypha are fusing together, and therefore the zygote will be formed. So these were the 5 methods through which sexual reproduction could occur in fungi, and this was the basic properties and different structures and different types which normally occur in the case of sexual reproduction in fungi. So now we have completed the nutrition and the reproduction and various types of reproduction in the kingdom fungi. So now we are going to start the categories of fungi. For example, the Phycomycetes, Ascomycetes, Zygomycetes or Oomycetes or the Deuteromycetes.